Takes a second to realize if we're live or not. Okay, looks like we're live. Welcome everyone to NCVLI's RISE Project latest Facebook Live series, Ask for Rights, a live series to create awareness of how to ask for victims' rights. Each session will focus on a different topic area around instances where we ask for rights for crime victims. My name is Danielle Cormier. I work for NCVLI as the communications coordinator, and I am here with Karin Ho today to talk about victims' rights. We'll be here live on the third Tuesday of each month in 2022 to speak with our partners across the country, including RISE Project Legal Clinics, to discuss innovative ways that we can ask for rights in various areas of our justice system to ensure crime victims are meaningfully engaged in our system and activating their respective rights. The National Crime Victim Law Institute fields thousands of technical assistance requests annually and encourages everyone to seek our expertise anytime you're facing challenges or concerns relating to or asserting or enforcing victims' rights. We are always here to help. This month, we're excited to have with us Karin Ho, Division of Victim Services and CISM program with the South Carolina Department of Corrections. Correct me if I'm wrong, Karin.
That's absolutely correct.
Welcome to our series, and thank you so much for your great work you're doing on behalf of crime victims. Let's start off with, can you tell us a little bit about how you're helping victims to ask for rights?
Well, first, let me say thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about post-conviction victims' rights. As a victim advocate, I'm very passionate about this topic, and I'm going to be very mindful of our time. But in many ways, I like to be creative because so often crime victims ask for services or they ask for support in a way that doesn't fit quite into a law. So we have to really interpret the laws and the statutes and constitutional rights outlined for victims, sometimes creatively within bureaucracies like a prison system or a post-conviction detention center or a community supervision area. What's important is, as an advocate or attorney working with those crime survivors, that we are able to match those rights and make sure that we help them navigate to meet those needs. In many ways, we've been able to do that, but most importantly, the very basic rights are very similar to pre-conviction. When it comes to post-conviction, victims have a right to hear information. They absolutely need notification. If they want to engage in any other services, they deserve restitution if it's been ordered. How often are we struggling in a post-conviction environment to simply fulfill a restitution order for a survivor, and they often have to turn to civil remedies or other ways to get that need met when in fact it should just happen. So it is very challenging. They also have a right to protection and understanding of the system. So I think one of the biggest dilemmas is how even working in the system that I am a part of in post-conviction in a prison system here in South Carolina, it's confusing to me. I can't imagine being a survivor of crime and trying to go through the process of understanding, given all of the trauma, the fear, the anxiety, the concern that I might have about the situation itself. So those are some of the ways that we are working hard to make sure victims can stay engaged and involved and informed.
Awesome. And when you think about this area of rights, what are some creative or innovative ways you've helped victims and survivors advocate their rights in this area? Do any specific cases come to mind?
Several. I have way over 35 years experience. I've worked in both the rape crisis world and the front end of the system and sexual assaults, all the way to post-conviction. And through those years, I certainly have had some concerning yet exciting challenges that we've been able to navigate for survivors. First and foremost, every survivor is different, right? We all know that. But at the same time, if I always center myself with victims have a right, a basic right to have meaningful consideration. Meaningful, meaning you're not just checking a box to say, I talked to the victim and not consider what they're saying. But it, on the other hand, doesn't guarantee 100% the outcome either. It is a part of the puzzle that the decision makers are putting together. So for crime victims, we have had many, many opportunities through the years. One situation comes to mind involving a death penalty case. And one of the challenges when it comes to laws in general, right, is they're written general. That's just as the word indicates. And you have to interpret, does it fit this situation? When it comes to actual capital offenses and the rights of victims to either witness or participate in an execution process can be very confusing and or very ambiguous. And it confuses the bureaucrats and everything. I was involved in a state where there was a statute that simply said there could be 3 witnesses designated by the victim's family. That was it. And if you really get technical about the law, when an inmate is executed for a crime on that particular day of the execution, they are being executed, given the sentence of death, for the crime committed on that particular instance. In one situation, we were involved where an offender had murdered 7 individuals and had multiple death sentences in multiple states. So all of the victim's family members basically raised their hand and said, I want to participate in this process. But technically, right, on one hand, well, we're only allowing witnesses for those that are actually a part of the process of this particular sentence. Nothing disregarding the other family members who wanted to be involved, but that's the way the law looked at it. So as a victim advocate, I couldn't stand for that, and nor could the families. We all as a system went to our superiors, the governor, the parole board, everyone we could in that particular jurisdiction, and asked for consideration. The law was as simple as I said. The victim may designate 3 witnesses, period, end of sentence. So we were able, through support of the bureaucracy and everyone there, to say, let's add an interpretation to that of per death sentence. Right? In our mind, it wasn't in the statute. It wasn't going against the statute. It wasn't really, it was ambiguous. We were successful in allowing multiple family witnesses to be designated for those death sentences. Now, we didn't go beyond the bounds of what was like, no one just could call and say, hey, I want to witness, but they had to have a certified death sentence in their particular case that had happened. And we were able to confirm that and then extend 3 seats or 3 witness opportunities for those families each. To me, that's a huge example of how don't just take the law simply and look at it and say, well, it doesn't say per death sentence. Ask the question, what if we try? The most that could happen is I could have come through that process and it not be successful. But you got to try on behalf of victims. And that's the most meaningful thing as an advocate, as an attorney, anyone can do, I think, on their behalf.
Absolutely. So with you saying all of that, you kind of have answered the next question, but maybe there's a possibility that you wanted to expand a little bit more, but what did you learn from this particular case, and that you think that others in jurisdictions with similar laws or those with similar cases might be able to benefit from?
I can certainly say, as I mentioned, don't give up, but most importantly is don't get caught up in just the language. Like, it's not a black and white world that we live in to say, here's the statute and we can't look beyond that. It's sad, but in many bureaucracies, we look at it that way. We filter everything through, is it in policy? Is it in law? Is it in statute? But as a survivor coming to a system needing support, they're not versed in that information. It's up to us to really consider meaningful consideration, right? That is what they're asking for within the bounds of possibilities. Another example is restorative justice. Oftentimes, prison systems, ours included, will not allow victim offender contact. That's for security reasons. Operationally, it's easier to run a prison if you don't have a concern that a victim coming in could get harmed in the process, or any visitor. So many states often will filter, screen, or prohibit completely a survivor of crime and the offender from having contact. A victim may call and genuinely need that contact, to have answers to questions given, or to be able to share information about the impact the crime has had on their family. Whatever might be meaningful for both the victim and offender, again, lesson learned. We ask ourselves, is it possible that this is meaningful for them? It may not be meaningful for me as a survivor, but it may be meaningful for you. So it's very difficult sometimes to simply look at a law and say, sorry, we can't do that, and move on, because that's not being trauma informed, right? That's one of the challenges of post-conviction work in general, is prisons, jails, parole, probation, everything that we work within our environment post-conviction is just now starting to understand that word, trauma informed, and being able to take that and connect the dots with what a survivor is asking for, and quite honestly, what an offender may be asking for, to come together to have that restorative opportunity, if necessary and if they want. So those are just a couple lessons learned.
All important ones, absolutely. And you had mentioned earlier a little bit about pre and post conviction. So when it comes to pre and post conviction environments, describe some of the differences you see in victims' rights in those arenas.
I love that question, because having worked for 11 years in the sexual assault field, as I mentioned earlier, I was on the front lines. When an assault would occur, I was working through the hospital, medical processes, investigations, all the way through the system until ultimately, potentially, a conviction. And honestly, victim advocates and many others in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that was the main focus, to say, let's get the conviction through, work with the survivor testifying in court, working all of that. And then the offender, there was a conviction, would go to prison. And I think our society often assumes everything goes back to normal, right? The offender is paying their debt to society. The survivor can move on and move forward. But we now know, decades later, what I've realized so clearly is it never ends at that point. Offenders may be running appeals, they may be asking questions, they may apply for clemency, they may have contact with the victim and threatening. I've had offenders mail letters to survivors and say, I'm being released on Monday, you'll be dead by Friday. What? So that post-conviction world cannot be forgotten when it comes to safety, security, notification, information. And so what I have learned about the two different arenas is we need to have a seamless system, and we currently do not. Many victim advocates who maybe work in a county pre-conviction environment don't have the information we have post-conviction, and vice versa. I don't communicate with their system. We don't share information. We don't connect the dots when it comes to that survivor. It literally is like a brand new bureaucracy, because it is, for that survivor. So here I am, if I'm a victim of crime and I'm traumatized, let's say I'm assaulted, the trauma is there. I connect with a victim advocate to help me walk through, hopefully, the pre-conviction piece. And then they're done. It's like a relay race. They want to pass the baton to us. And that victim's left there standing. I'm like, wait, where do I go now? Oh, I have to talk to all these new people? If I find them, if I can even find them in the prison system. But I'm thrilled to say now, decades later, that we are much better, in a better place. And many prison systems and commissioners and secretaries and directors of correctional agencies understand this much better. So it's evolved. But one area that I wanted to really point out as a resource for anyone looking for this is NIC, the National Institute for Corrections, as well as NCBLI. There are national leaders in this field that can really help us connect dots for survivors and see how the rights need to be seamless. And we shouldn't be siloed in each of our different respective areas. As providers for survivors, we need to make it simple for them by all means. So NIC often pulls us together. I say that kind of loosely. They pull us together to have various discussions about post-conviction work, specifically this arena of being a victim advocate in corrections how do we navigate? Because we're quite often alone. And because all of our states now can connect, if I have a situation, let's say with a death penalty case, I can call my colleagues in Texas or in Ohio or in California and ask, how did you navigate this? And we've created that professional network. There is also an actual professional network. It's called NAVAC, the National Association of Victim Assistance in Corrections. So not only are there like NOVA, National Organization of Victim Assistance, but there's NAVAC for corrections specific because it's so different. And that's why I'm so grateful for this opportunity to do a Facebook Live, because so often the post-conviction victim advocacy world is left out of the discussion. And we very strongly feel that it needs to be right at the table with every other victim advocate to not forget survivors' challenges going through that post-conviction world when it comes to a prison or parole or probation or a detention center.
Absolutely. This was also very enlightening to me. I'm glad that we are spotlighting corrections in our Facebook Lives as well. So thank you so much for giving us a lot more information that we may have been missing before and leading us to new sources. So just a big thank you for joining me today. And to learn more about the National Crime Victim Law Institute, the RISE Project, and our Ask for Rights campaign, go to ncvli.org today, and see you next month.